8 companies control nearly every Scotch whisky brand you have ever poured. The bottle with the ancient Scottish crest, the limited edition single malt you waited 3 years to find. Trace any of them back far enough and you will land on one of 8 corporate parents. And more than half of those parent companies are not even Scottish. One of them makes handbags, one of them makes brandy in the Philippines, and one of them holds roughly half of all the Scotch whisky maturing in Scotland right now. Let us start with the smallest player on this list and work our way up. Number 8. Brown-Forman. If the name sounds familiar, it should. Brown-Forman is the Louisville, Kentucky company behind Jack Daniel's Tennessee Whiskey. Jack Daniel's drives roughly 71% of their total revenue. What catches people off guard is that the Jack Daniel's company also owns 3 single malt Scotch distilleries in Scotland. In 2016, Brown-Forman paid approximately £285 million to acquire the Ben Riach Distillery Company, which brought Glendronach, Ben Riach and Glenglassaugh under the same corporate umbrella as Old Forester and Woodford Reserve. Glendronach sits in the hills of the Scottish Highlands and was founded in 1826. It is known for its richly sherried whiskies and has a devoted following among collectors who chase the older single cask releases. Ben Riach is a Speyside distillery that dates back to 1898, known for experimenting with peated and unpeated expressions and a wide range of cask finishes. Glenglassaugh sits on the coast of the northern Scottish Highlands overlooking the North Sea. But here is the part that tells you everything about where the Scotch industry is right now. In early 2025, Brown-Forman shifted Glenglassaugh to a shared production model with Ben Riach, consolidating operations as demand softened. The company also cut 12% of its overall workforce in 2025, roughly 640 people. Then, the biggest story broke. In late March 2026, Brown-Forman and Pernod Ricard confirmed active merger discussions. If that deal closes, it would create a combined spirits company worth roughly $30 billion by market capitalization, ranking number 2 globally behind Diageo. No agreement has been finalized as of early April 2026, but a deal of that size would reshape Scotch ownership entirely. Number 7. LVMH. This one always gets a reaction. LVMH, the French luxury conglomerate behind Louis Vuitton, Dior and Moet and Chandon, owns 2 of Scotland's most respected single malt distilleries, Glenmorangie and Ardbeg. LVMH acquired the Glenmorangie company in 2004, outbidding Pernod Ricard in the process. Glenmorangie, located in Tain in the Scottish Highlands, has been the best-selling single malt in Scotland almost every year since 1983. The distillery is famous for having the tallest stills in Scotland, which produce a lighter, more elegant spirit. Around 10 million bottles are produced every year, and the brand holds roughly a 6% share of the global single malt market. But it is Ardbeg that really makes whiskey enthusiasts do a double take. Ardbeg is one of the most celebrated peated single malts in the world, distilled on a remote Scottish island off the west coast. It has cult status among collectors and consistently wins global awards. The Glenmorangie company bought the rundown Ardbeg distillery from Allied Distillers in 1997 for just £7 million and invested heavily in restoring it. Today, Ardbeg has been named International Whiskey Competition Distillery of the Year 4 times in 5 years. So the same luxury group that sells handbags for thousands of dollars also makes one of the smokiest, most intensely flavoured whiskies on the planet. And most Ardbeg fans have no idea. Number 6. Emperador. The Philippines is not the first country that comes to mind when you think about Scotch whisky. But Emperador Inc., a publicly listed company on both the Philippine and Singapore stock exchanges, owns 5 Scottish distilleries through its White and Mackay subsidiary. Emperador paid £430 million for White & Mackay in 2014. The deal brought the Dalmore, Jura, Fettercairn and Tamnavulin single malt distilleries into the portfolio, along with the Invergordon Grain Distillery and the White & Mackay blended Scotch brand. White & Mackay is ranked as the 5th largest Scotch whisky manufacturer in the world, with products distributed in over 100 countries and a production capacity of 50 million litres of alcohol per year. The Dalmore is the crown jewel here. It is positioned as a luxury brand and has set auction records for individual bottles, including a one-of-a-kind 1926 single malt that sold for £250,000. At the other end of the spectrum, Jura recently pivoted toward a smokier, sweeter core range and has emerged as the #1 single malt brand in the United Kingdom by volume. So the world's biggest brandy producer, a company most famous for a spirit that dominates bars across Southeast Asia, also happens to own one of Scotland's most prestigious luxury whiskey brands. Number 5. Bacardi. Bacardi, the world's largest privately held spirits company, headquartered in Hamilton, Bermuda, operates 5 Scotch whisky distilleries in Scotland through its John Dewar and Sons subsidiary. Those distilleries are Aberfeldy, Altmore, Craigelachie, Macduff and Royal Brackla. The backstory here is worth knowing. When Diageo was formed in 1997 through the merger of Guinness and Grand Metropolitan, the new company controlled so much of the Scotch whisky market that regulators forced it to sell assets. Bacardi bought the Dewar's brand and 4 distilleries in 1998. Macduff was already in the Bacardi portfolio. Dewar's White Label is the 5th best-selling blended Scotch in the world and the leading blended Scotch in the United States. William Lawson's, also under the Bacardi umbrella, is the 2nd fastest growing Scotch whisky brand globally. In 2014, John Dewar and Sons launched the Last Great Malts collection, finally releasing single malt expressions from all 5 distilleries under their own names. Aberfeldy, Altmore, Craigelachie, the Deveron from Macduff, and Royal Brackla spent generations as anonymous contributors to the Dewar's blend. Most of their whiskey had never been bottled as a single malt before, so the rum company behind the Bacardi Mojito also owns some of the most underrated single malts in Scotland. Those malts spent decades hidden inside blended whiskey before anyone got to taste them on their own. Number 4. Edrington. Edrington is based in Glasgow and is one of the few Scotch whisky companies still rooted in Scotland. But do not let the Scottish headquarters fool you into thinking this is a small operation. Core revenue hit £912 million in the fiscal year ending March 2025, though that was a 10% drop from the year before as consumer demand for spirits softened globally. Edrington owns 4 Scottish distilleries: Macallan, Highland Park, Glenrothes and Glenturret. The company also co-owns the North British Grain Distillery with Diageo. Macallan is the centrepiece. It is the world's #1 single malt Scotch whisky by value, and it is not particularly close. The brand celebrated its 200th anniversary in 2024 with its 2nd highest year of sales ever. Macallan has built an end-to-end sherry cask supply chain that includes partnerships with a cooperage in Jerez, Spain, and 2 sawmills in northern Spain to control the wood that shapes every bottle. Highland Park from the Orkney Islands offers a completely different character with its heather honey and gentle smoke. Glenrothes sits quietly in Speyside, producing elegant fruity whiskies that fly under the radar compared to its siblings. Here is what changed recently. In July 2025, Edrington sold the Famous Grouse and Naked Malt brands to William Grant and Sons. Famous Grouse has been Scotland's best-selling whisky since 1980 and sells approximately 2.7 million cases a year worldwide. Edrington said the move allowed them to exit the blended Scotch category and focus entirely on ultra-premium spirits. That sale reshuffled the ownership map significantly. Edrington's principal shareholder is the Robertson Trust, a Scottish charitable trust that has donated over £396 million to causes in Scotland since 1961. So every bottle of Macallan sold ultimately helps fund charitable work in Scotland. Not many whiskey drinkers know that. Number 3, William Grant & Sons. William Grant & Sons is the biggest independent whiskey company in Scotland and the third largest Scotch producer overall with an 8% market share. It ships about 7.6 million cases per year. The company was founded in 1887 by William Grant, and it is still run by his descendants, making it the largest of the handful of Scotch whisky distillers remaining in family ownership. The distillery portfolio includes Glenfiddich, the world's best-selling single malt Scotch by volume. Glenfiddich essentially created the single malt category as we know it today. In 1963, it became one of the first distilleries to actively market its whiskey as a single malt, at a time when nearly everything was sold as blended Scotch. The Balvenie sits right next door in Dufftown, and is known for its traditional floor maltings and its range of cask-finished expressions. Keenanvere and Ailsa Bay round out the malt distillery lineup, with Girvan operating as their grain whisky distillery in Ayrshire. And then came the famous Grouse acquisition. In July 2025, William Grant & Sons completed its purchase of famous Grouse and Naked Malt from Edrington's 1887 company. Famous Grouse is Scotland's #1 selling whisky brand, and bringing it under the William Grant roof alongside Glenfiddich, Balvenie and Monkey Shoulder gave the company an enormous boost in the blended category. So the last major family-owned Scotch whisky company now controls both the best-selling single malt and the best-selling blended Scotch in Scotland. That is a significant concentration of control and power in hands that do not answer to public shareholders. Quick thing before we get to the top 2 on this list. The data on this channel shows that over 80% of you watching right now are not subscribed. That means you are showing up for the content, but the algorithm has no reason to show you the next video. If you have made it this far, you clearly care about Scotch whisky. Hit subscribe so you do not miss the next one. Number 2, Pernod Ricard. Pernod Ricard is a French company headquartered in Paris. It is one of the world's leading spirits businesses, operating more than 100 production sites across 80 countries with around 18,000 employees. Its Scotch whisky operations run through Chivas Brothers, which operates 14 Scottish malt distilleries plus the Strathclyde Grain Distillery in Glasgow. All but one of those malt distilleries are located in Speyside, the exception being Scapa on the Orkney Islands. Chivas Brothers employs roughly 1,600 people across 26 sites in Scotland, including distilleries, bottling facilities, and over 300 warehouses holding more than 6 million casks. The brand portfolio here is massive. Ballantine's is the second best-selling Scotch whisky in the world after Johnnie Walker. Chivas Regal sits in third place globally and has been the market-leading Scotch aged 12 years and older in Europe and Asia Pacific. Royal Salute operates at the ultra-premium end. The Glenlivet is the global #2 single malt behind Glenfiddich. Beyond those headline brands, Chivas Brothers owns Aberlour, Longmorn, Strathisla, which is the oldest continuously operating Highland distillery dating back to 1786, Scapa, Milton Duff, Glenbergie, Glentorquers, Glenallachie, and the newly built Dalmanach Distillery, which opened in 2015, with a production capacity of 10 million litres per year. Here is the detail that puts the Pernod Ricard scale in perspective. The company claims to be the global leader in luxury Scotch whisky, holding 85% of the market share for Scotch aged 21 years and older. That means when you are buying a bottle of Scotch old enough to legally drink itself, there is an 85% chance it came from a Pernod Ricard distillery. And if the Brown-Forman merger discussions result in a deal, Pernod Ricard's Scotch portfolio would merge with Glendronach, Benriach, and Glenglassaugh, creating an even more dominant second-place player. Number 1, Diageo. And now for the company that makes every other name on this list look small. Diageo is a British multinational headquartered in London. Net sales across all brands hit $20.2 billion in fiscal year 2025. The company operates from 132 sites in nearly 180 countries. It was formed in 1997 through the merger of Guinness and Grand Metropolitan, two of Britain's biggest drinks companies. In Scotch whisky, Diageo operates 31 malt distilleries in Scotland. That is not a typo. 31. This accounts for roughly 1/3 of the entire Scottish whisky industry's total malt distilling capacity. On top of those, they run Cameron Bridge, Scotland's largest grain whisky distillery, founded in 1824. But the number that really puts Diageo's dominance in perspective is this one. Diageo has approximately 10 million casks of Scotch maturing across Scotland right now. According to their own corporate materials, that is roughly half of all the Scotch whisky currently resting in Scotland. One company holds half the inventory of an entire national spirit. Their flagship brand is Johnnie Walker, the best-selling Scotch whisky in the world by a significant margin. Beyond Johnnie Walker, the blended Scotch portfolio includes J&B, Bell's, Buchanan's, Black & White, Hague, VAT 69 and White Horse. On the single malt side, the names read like a greatest hits list. Lagavulin, Talisker, Oban, Caol Ila, Dalwhinnie, Cragganmore, Cardew, Clynelish and the Singleton, which draws whisky from the Glen Ord, Glendullan and Dufftown distilleries. In 2024, Diageo reopened the Port Ellen distillery after it had been closed for 40 years. That same year, the company formed the Diageo Luxury Group to focus on ultra-premium expressions. And Brora in the Highlands was reopened in 2021 after a painstaking restoration, with a 50-year-old single malt released to mark the occasion. But Diageo's reach goes well beyond Scotch. The same company that owns Lagavulin also owns Guinness, Smirnoff, Tanqueray, Bailey's and holds a 34% stake in Moet Hennessy, which means Diageo has a financial interest in the parent company of its competitor Glenmorangie and Ardbeg through LVMH. The corporate web runs deep, and here is where the current state of the industry makes all of this consolidation hit differently. Scotch whisky exports fell 0.6% in value and 4.3% in volume in 2025. Exports to the United States, the industry's most valuable market, dropped 15% in volume after a 10% tariff was implemented in April 2025. Single malt exports specifically fell 6% in value to £1.6 billion. 1 in 5 Scottish distilleries are now in financial distress, according to data from restructuring firm BTG, with 69 distilleries facing significant or critical financial issues as of December 2025. That number rose over 40% in just the final 3 months of 2025 alone. Worldwide Scotch sales fell 3% in the first half of 2025, marking the third consecutive year of decline after decades of growth. Demand peaked during the COVID lockdowns in 2020 and has been falling ever since. And Generation Z consumers drink roughly 20% less than millennials, who already consume less than older generations. The long-term trend line is moving in one direction. We have seen this before. During the Scotch whisky bust of the late 1970s and 1980s, Diageo's predecessor closed 21 malt distilleries in 1983 and 1985 alone. The financially weakened distilleries that survived were bought up, and that wave of consolidation built the exact ownership structure we just walked through. Every sign suggests the next wave has already started. Brown-Forman and Pernod Ricard are in merger talks. Suntory has merged production teams at Bowmore and Laphroaig in Scotland. Diageo halted production at its Rose Isle maltings in late 2025. Craft distillery closures are accelerating across Scotland, and the labels on your shelf continue to tell stories of heritage, tradition, and independence. None of that makes the whisky any less well crafted. A great Scotch stays a great Scotch regardless of who signs the checks. But knowing who actually owns what gives you a much clearer picture of the market you are buying into, and a better understanding of why certain bottles cost what they cost. If this breakdown helped you see the Scotch aisle differently, subscribe to the channel. We will see you in the next one.